Another stupid video on data, standards, and engineering on a subject. Rimfire ammunition. 22 caliber, nominally 5mm variety rimfire. It's mostly the only thing left in rimfire. They've had things up to this big of a diameter be rimfire using black powder, which expands at a lower speed but still has the same resultant expansion of 1000 to 1 or whatever. And now we use fast burning smokeless powder, which you wouldn't want to use in one of those. These are usually metal casings that replace paper casings. I did a video on shotgun shells and bullet types for each extreme of what a person could technically fire without breaking their arm and blowing themselves onto their butt, because at that point it would essentially be a cannon, all the way down to something that if you fire it you might not hear it. But this is actually more practical. Rimfire ammunition is basically 22 caliber and a little bigger. And it's funny. And the funny thing is, the larger the caliber, like 9mm, yes, there is 9mm rimfire, it's usually a tiny shotgun shell, because making a center fire little primer for one is just slightly impractical. So in Britain and some other countries, you can get a ultra low diameter shotgun that's the same as a 9mm pistol, but it's a long barrel shotgun. So let's move on. The standard for this works at 25,500 psi on average for max output. Now, what is the range and sizes? If you were trying to make a universal bore, you might not want to, but someone has done it. It's an extremely difficult thing. 0.222 inches to 0.225 inches for the projectile. That's 5.6mm to 5.7mm nominal. Now, these are absolutely for different bullets. They're not supposed to go into the same chamber, because unless you use the really powerful tolerant barrel, you're going to have a lot of problems. This is already a weak ammunition type case. It's not reinforced at the base like a shotgun shell, and it's not full brass like a normal bullet would be. I mean, it is full brass, but it's really thin. This is essentially a metal package. Now, the other range for it, for the case, this is where you get 0.226, which is the most common, up to 2.455 exactly. That's strangely specific. That works out as 5.74mm up to 6.236mm casing. Now, what that refers to is I did a video more detail about cartridges for shotguns, and it covered all the weird ones, but there's only like 5 or 6 real ones that are used. Bullets aren't like that, so I'm only going to cover rimfire because it's really limited. There's maybe half a dozen, besides the 9mm and all that weird crap that's actually shotgun shell. That's why I used those in that video. But here's the weird thing. The case can be the same size, smaller, or larger than the bullet in rimfire. This is actually the only range I know of where you can kind of get away with it, and it's because of the way you can make the chamber for a bullet to go into, including, yes, there's some weird ones where it puts the bullet up and it has a chamber that clasps around it, and the shell casing is smaller than the bullet. It's a necked up bullet. Sometimes they're called dunce cap rounds. Some of them are even cone shaped. But anyway, the ones that are practical are 22 caliber Magnum rifle and short and BB caps, and literally caps for cap and ball pistols that use black powder. It was a metal cap that was put over on the end. It's the same, almost identical to the little caps you have in a cap gun. It's just a metal casing for cap guns. It's a heavy duty cap. And this is now turned into the primer. So basically this is a adapted primer like you'd have in a shotgun, converted into a full shell. That's how it worked. And in order to keep it from having anything complicated, they would make their little casing like that, and then at the bottom they would crinkle it in for a really tiny amount, like 0.5 millimeter, and put just the primer in the outside edge, and you'd have to pinch it over here and crunch it, which means you're not supposed to reload them. You can, but you don't want to. You really don't want to do that. So anyway, what are the varieties of this? Now again, the range of it is, and they overlap, is the casing is usually bigger than the projectile, or they're exactly the same size, and sometimes, yes, freak rounds, the bullet is bigger. Now the extreme end of this is where the cartridge is this big and the bullet's much smaller. Those fire basically pellet gun sized 17 caliber pellet gun rounds, but they're bullets. This is the equivalent to taking a nail gun blank, jamming it into your pellet gun and trying to fire it. Except that this actually works. And one of them is literally, I'm not joking, they literally said, yes, we took a 27mm or whatever nail gun blank for driving nails into cement and used it to drive this. I think they did it on a dare. So anyway, here we go. First one up for bid, and it has no real order of size or anything. 22 caliber Winchester Magnum rimfire, aka 22 WMR, 22 Win Mag, or 22 WMRF. It has the most names for it. Anyway, all of these work underneath the 25,000 psi range normally. That's total pressure on the entire body of the thing. So when you do it, this is the trick to making all the bullets go down the barrel, is you use a squeeze barrel. The further down the barrel it is where it's going to have a constriction point, the more the pressure is spread out and the more likely you are to get away with it. There are guns that will fire literally anything you can shove into the barrel, into the chamber, and it'll literally malform and squeeze the bullet out. Not a good idea or safe, but it can be done. And there's a universal gun for that, and it is actually semi-auto, so it will try to cycle the cartridges no matter how mutilated they look. So anyway, here we go. And that one has a whole bunch of characteristics that are going to be listed below. I'll cover them in a minute if you want, if I'm going to be covering a couple of these. Then there's the 22 long rifle, 22 long, and extra long. They have almost identical characteristics, except it's a longer tube with more powder, or a longer bullet, or a mix and match of each. So you could fire literally a BB gun pellet with way too much gunpowder behind it. Experimentation was done a lot, and this is one of the first actual cartridges. Then you have the short 22S, and if it's LR, long rifle, and it's L for long only, and XL for extra long. There's also 22 BB and CB. These are conical, bulleted breech cap kind of things, where it's just literally a primer from a musket that had a lead ball stuck in it, or a cone-shaped. The cone-shaped ones actually have powder in it normally. The other ones are just literally the primer. They're just for shooting something across the room or across the table in most cases. However, then there's blank rounds, which again are used for driving nails or just making a bang noise. They're basically uber-sized cap gun caps. Some of them are also used as driver rounds and starter rounds, and an extremely large version of it is featured in a movie where it's this big. I'm not kidding. It's a giant blank, and all it does is start an airplane engine. Like I said, this is a format that's been around a long time, and things that were done with it would not be done now. And yes, some people actually get these guns, and the weird thing about some of the guns, I mean, some of them are like 44 caliber, is legally you can get a gun manufacturer or a gunsmith to rebuild them to use normal cartridges, because literally it's safer to rebore them out or change out the chamber and convert it to something more standard than to try to even find or use these. When you see the only pictures of them show lead bullets rotting or getting dendrites where they literally look furry, that's when you start letting people mod the guns. And that includes 9mm shotguns being legally converted over to perfectly legal, street legal, smoothbore rifles, because honestly they're grandfathered in and it's allowed. Next, Winchester Rimfire 22, aka 22 WRF. Now the bullet diameters and the neck diameters and stuff are interesting. Now I'm going to go to the sub caliber. Now this is one of the ways to increase or change performance of the bullet. As I said, the pressure level from the shell is spread out over the entire surface area, including the back of the bullet. If you make a barrel longer and make the bullet smaller, it will push the bullet down the barrel for a longer distance to expend the pressure. So you could technically get away with doing a smaller amount of charge in the same space, make the bullet physically smaller, or whatever. Here are the pellet gun rounds. 17 Hornady Mach 2, aka 17 M2. These things go up to 35,000 psi in a rimfire bullet. Yeah. So anyway, and these are worked out at these dimensions. The bullet's projectile diameter is stated at 4.4 millimeter, or 0.172 inch, aka 17.2 caliber, or 172. The case diameter can be changed up and down, but it starts off at 0.226 inches, aka 22 caliber, very close, and up to 0.268 or 270, or 27 caliber case. I use the word caliber and such interchangeably. This actual diameter range is 5.74 millimeters to 6.83 millimeters. As you can see, there's a large amount of variation when you actually use decimal numbers. That's a lot of variation, and that allows you to customize the speed of the thing, performance of the thing, or how much you hate your barrel. So anyway, 17 Hornady Mach 2, 17 M2, because there was a 17 M1. 17 Hornady Magnum rimfire, it's the 17 HMR, because it wasn't already neck down and overdriven, and basically they look like really tiny 223 rounds like Paddock used, only really, really tiny. Then there's the 17 Winchester Super Magnum, Win, and it's literally 17 Win Super Mag. The abbreviation for it is just basically saying the same thing. And this is the one that's funny because it's based on a 27 caliber nail gun blank parent case. It isn't actually the same case size, technically. And when you look it up, almost nobody lists its diameter for its chambering. Along with the next one, the 17 PCM Agula. The 17 PCM Agula is a 17.2 caliber, 4.4 millimeter. All of them are 4.4. It's very close to an air gun or pellet gun diameter. And it's the one that has a case length and overall length and rim thickness and rim diameter, all that kind of stuff. It's at almost 7 millimeter. So yeah, that's the 6.9 millimeter rim diameter for the extraction rim. They don't list the actual sizes of the bullets on the Wikipedia page, and it is actually listed partially in the saami.org page. And this is where I actually bring up the standards pages I've been using. SAAMI is a voluntary organization of people who create the standards for bullets and chambers and guns. The idea is, at one time, you can make a gun any way you wanted to, and you can make your own customized ammo. That's fine, but everybody figured out standardization would work better. Interchangeable parts were pioneered, pun intended, for guns. And by making them all compatible with each other, you end up with things like the AR-15 having every company on Earth making parts for it, except for the company, in some cases, that was involved in making them in the first place, Armalite. Everybody else can make one. Some of these standards are so open that there's no patent or copyright to them. For instance, using a nail gun blank, repurposing something else for this purpose. If you and I do it, it's considered, a Cat 5 Hurricane, go to federal prison, ATF, and pizza party. But for them, because they're a gun manufacturer, they can create a standard out of nothing. I can create a standard using any bullet size, casing size, that hasn't been used yet. Just figure out one that's in the middle, or 19.0003, whatever, big ass bullet. I could come up with something as long as it's not illegal to make it, and then design a gun around it. Or everybody could just standardize. So the SAAMI standards are agreed upon standards of the industry. Now, is this a monopoly keeping people out of inventing a better gun? Okay, this is the most limited pistol and rifle category I can come up with. I'm not even covering rifles, where there's 100, no joke, 100 near this diameter. I'm just doing rimfire because I can do a video in 15 minutes for it. I don't think anybody's trying to restrict anybody from inventing a new goddamn gun or bullet. Anyway, the SAAMI listing for it was, this was one of the shorter ones. The only thing shorter was shotguns, and I'll be doing a video on that next. This is not a deep dive. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am wrong, and most of the stuff is so vague that the reason the standards organization exists is just so somebody has something to look up if they want to make a gun rack or something. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.